Welcome to Sex, Love and Science with Laurie Muratori, clinical psychosexual therapist and relationship expert. This podcast explores sexuality, relationships, and the many facets in between, aiming to normalize sexual conversations, issues that we all face. Let's take the taboo out of sexuality and open up the conversations for a better sexual existence. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Welcome back to Sex, Love and Science. This is your host, Laurie Muratori. Today I'll be talking about kitchen table polyamory. Does it work? Does it not work? Is it a myth? Well, I've got two beautiful people here who are going to be talking about it with me today. I've got Markus Stone and Rochelle Siemienowicz. Is that right?
Yes, that's great. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys, for coming on. Now, I'd love to know actually how you talk to people. Like, do you disclose your relationship to people like that were, polyamorous to people straight off the bat? Like, is this something that when you're talking to people, friends, I'm kind of curious.
I find it's very situation dependent.
Yeah.
If I'm in an Uber, maybe not so much.
Okay.
But, I guess the thing is if you're at a party and you reach a point in the conversation where you kind of feel like it would naturally come into the conversation, you have to make a decision about whether you want to pursue that. Because if there's someone that's not from that background, they tend to go, oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And then that's the next half hour of explaining your relationship to them. And sometimes you don't want to go down that path. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, exactly.
And it's not necessarily from a sense of shame or embarrassment. It's more just like, it's a story that you've told many times.
Yeah, going through the rigmarole of the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and I guess there can be judgment as well as like, oh, I could never do that and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because the reason why I was thinking is, just that is retelling the story over and over again. And here I am having you retell your story. So thank you.
This is okay.
It's a good story. And the good thing about when you do admit that or bring that into the conversation, you immediately go to some interesting places with people. It's almost like a fast track to an intimate and meaningful conversation that isn't just small talk.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I guess with that level of disclosure comes a bit of, trust and vulnerability as well. And people probably really radiate and enjoy that.
Yeah, and everybody's got their own take on it. And I find these days there's a lot less sort of automatic knee-jerk judgment or negative reaction and more just curiosity or even just, that's cool, so are we,
Yeah. Well, okay, let's start at the beginning then. Could you briefly, in a good synopsis, give us a little bit of insight into your story. How did it unfold and how did you start the polyamory journey?
Well, we didn't really start out. Polyamory kind of found us in a way, didn't it? We started out as actually an affair to start with. We didn't know about polyamory.
There you go.
It wasn't, back then it wasn't so sort of in the zeitgeist, I suppose. And, well, perhaps you want to...
Yeah. Well, so we're talking 10 years ago in Australia where I think things are a little bit less progressive. I'd heard of polyamory in some circles in like San Francisco, and there was some, there was that book Sex at Dawn that came out and that kind of thing. But I didn't know a single other poly or non-monogamous person. Yeah, well, I had tried an open marriage back in my early 20s, back in the 90s, and it had sort of all fallen apart spectacularly. But that was what I called open marriage, not really polyamory. Polyamory was a word that sort of came into the vocab later on, and I didn't know another poly person.
Yeah. How isolating to a degree. I guess actually what I do want to point out though for listeners out there is what is polyamory? So it's the love of many, I guess, if you wanted to simply define it. Polyamory is not always the same as an open relationship. And in, I guess, in literature and clinical, I guess, evidence base, people talk about consensual non-monogamy. And then there's also ethical non-monogamy. So preferably, my preference, I don't know about you guys, I don't like ethical non-monogamy because it says monogamy or non-monogamy has an ethics to it. So I just call it consensual non-monogamy, or I use just open relationships as an umbrella term. That's just my personal opinion. What are your thoughts on that, briefly?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean, because what you're talking about is a moral judgment inherent in saying ethical. And
correct. Yeah. I just find that really off-putting.
Yeah.
So why are we putting an ethical judgment that monogamy has to be the way?
Yeah.
So it's ethical non-monogamy makes it okay, but I mean, it should.
I assume that's as a response to sort of, I guess, judgmentalism about people being non-monogamous, that there's something wrong with it inherently. So sort of, is it an attempt to claim a morality around that? I don't know.
That's potentially. That's just my tidbit of information for the day.
But I like it. I like, consensual non-monogamy. That works. I mean, they're all just descriptors for the thing, aren't they?
Correct. And then I guess another episode could be, so for your listeners out there, we might describe and talk about the different types of polyamory. But I would love to just hear more about, your style, your dynamic, which I guess could be described as kitchen table. Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah. So kitchen table polyamory is where all the people involved in a relationship kind of in the circle, the extended circle, can sit around a table and theoretically share a meal together without discomfort. They could all, they might not all be involved in a relationship with each other sexually or romantically, but there's a baseline of trust, friendship, and mutual respect.
That's amazing. I'm sure that's probably quite confronting for a lot of people out there who are not in open relationships, to imagine that just few couples, several people are all in romantic or sexual relationships with one another, and they can all share a meal.
Yeah, I mean, this is in contrast to a don't ask, don't tell policy, which a lot of couples who might be non-monogamous might have, especially if it's a casual kind of, hookup thing where it doesn't need to be fully discussed. But with kitchen table, it's about those deep, meaningful, ongoing relationships that you might have with multiple people. So you could theoretically all be at the same birthday party or Christmas lunch or that kind of thing.
And I like how you talked about there's a mutual respect. How long did it take for you, I guess, for everybody involved to get there? I could imagine jealousy and, really just like existential dilemmas of what are we doing at the start would really make that challenging.
Well, I think there's a change that happens when a relationship opens up. That's it's a big shift in terms of changing the dynamic, and there's often a fair bit of what's the word, like, how do I fit into this relationship now, given its changing shape?
Got it.
And there can be, some insecurities around that on all sides, really, because it's a big sort of rearrangement of things. And
that makes so hopefully you feel comfortable answering this question. So when I like that point of going open, like all of a sudden we're open. Do you think that changes the eroticism, right? From maybe something that was, if you started off as an affair, it's kind of, with this secrecy and, that heightens the eroticism, and that kind of makes it that all consuming, I must have you. And then when you're open, it's accepted, everyone's on board, and
there's no taboo anymore.
Yeah, there's no more taboo. So does that change the sex? If you feel
well, suddenly your you're having someone else involved in that relationship, and you have to consider their feelings as well, and that creates limits on what you could previously do because there was that person
didn't know.
Yeah. So for example, with us, after my metamor decided he wanted to include me in this sort of family and sort of open things up, he had boundaries around that, which is fair enough.
Yep.
Which we had to respect. And to begin with, that felt quite restricting in contrast to what had been before. But over time, once people get to know each other and feel more secure in the relationship, and also the other thing that helps is, he found another partner himself.
Yes.
And that
so there's four of you.
Yeah. So that became
at the table
easier in terms of well, I know that I haven't been comfortable with you having sleepovers before, for example.
Yes.
But if I want to have sleepovers with my partner, then I'm going to have to allow that. And that sort of
sounds like it's creating a balance or
balance. Yeah, that balance helps.
Or at least understanding and empathizing with wants and needs.
Yeah. And there's a thing like in poly relationships where nothing happens at the same time. You know what I mean? Like you have one person who's having a great time with a new relationship and you might not be finding anyone.
And that's what people struggle with.
And being okay with the fact that, this is me right now, but it's not always going to be like that.
Yes. And I think that is a big struggle for a lot of people, is that they feel like they have to keep up with their partner. If their partner has X amount of sexual partners, then I need to be hooking up. And I don't know about you guys, but when I speak to a lot of couples in clinic and people who just start opening up and you're on the apps, they're hooking up, and it's like a race to get as many sexual partners as possible. And it sounds like what you've done is almost the opposite, where you've almost had to constrict the sexual aspect to take everybody's feelings into accountability, and you've also been maybe giving more freedom in terms of sleepovers, etc. But it's an interesting kind of way of looking at different open relationships.
Yeah. I mean, just to give some context, so we started an affair 10 years ago, and about 10 months into that, I confessed to my nesting partner, who is my partner who I live with. And he made the unusual decision to try and incorporate Markus into our family. That was incredibly difficult for about a year.
Yep.
Then he found a new partner, and that sort of all started easing up. And here we are down the track where we can all go on holidays together. We can all have Christmas together. There's a level of openness and just trust, and it doesn't need to be tit for tat, but it's a process, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that might be something really important for people to hear, is the first year was challenging. I could imagine kind of grueling and kind of maybe hellish at times and incredibly anxiety inducing. Is there anything you'd like to comment on, especially Rochelle, because you have a nesting partner who, I guess for more context, would be Markus's metamor.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So everybody following home can connect the dots. But I mean, what was, do you feel comfortable commenting on what that year was like with at home and just trying to, I guess, create this harmony?
Yeah, it was so challenging. And I think, made so much worse by the fact that I'd deceived my nesting partner and I'd had this affair. And so we were dealing with this breach of trust and the dishonesty that I'd been living with. So there was all of that going on. He had to deal with that. It was an incredible gift of generosity, and just he went through hell to do that for me, and he did that because he loved me. But I also feel that he was able to do that because Markus was so easy to love, obviously, and adorable, but so gentle and so competitive, and Marcus was so open to helping my nesting partner make that transition as easy as he could, and they got along so well, which is a chemistry thing. I mean, you can't predict that. So I definitely wouldn't be advising someone wanting to go into poly to start off with that non-monogamy like we did, but I'm also saying that things are really possible if you have the trust and keep working at it, and everyone involved is prepared to just go through those really difficult emotions. Because even if it's fully consensual and honest, and everyone's like, in theory, this is the thing, in theory, and then in practice. And you got to remember that even if everyone's theoretically on board, when stuff gets real, the emotions get real, and sometimes they're really unexpected.
Yes. And that discomfort is just not fun. I really liked Rochelle's synopsis, but, you know, when she spoke about you getting along with her nesting partner and the work that you did to kind of make him feel comfortable. What did you do out of curiosity? I mean, besides be lovable?
Well, the thing that keeps coming up in your mind is that he wanted to meet me, and all my friends were telling me, don't go.
Oh, God.
He'll bring a knife, you know. And it was scary. It was really scary, you know. And like Rochelle had told me that, you know, had reassured me that he's not a violent man to a start. But he rang me. And that was the thing that really made me feel reassured, the way he spoke to me on the phone. And I thought, well, you know, if he's brave enough to want to do that, I'll honor that. And so I met him in a bar, and we just clicked.
Without me?
Yeah, without Rochelle there. And
wow. He didn't want me there. I was like, I want to orchestrate this on my own.
Yeah. But I think also we were both coming to it from a point of view of vulnerability, because for me, I was in love with Rochelle, and this man had the potential to take that away from me. And same vice versa. Do you know what I mean? Like, so we were both coming to it from a point of view of like, well, what do we do? We're both in a situation where we're, you know, both in love with the same person, and neither of us, and it was not in the least bit aggressive. It was kind of like a really bonding moment.
Sounds like a meeting of the minds and hearts to a degree of, here we are, we're in the same boat, we love the same person, what do we do?
Yeah, and I never wanted, like, I'd been through a divorce myself, and I didn't want to inflict that upon, you know, Rochelle and the family and that sort of stuff. It's an ugly process.
Correct.
So it's kind of like, what do we do? And it was actually David that came to the idea of you know, in trying to incorporate this into the relationship. Wow. There's another part to what you said as well that was after that.
I think that's a good. Yeah, I like hearing how it sounds like the trust started.
I guess, and I guess from there it was a matter of, well, I think you build trust by sort of respecting boundaries and that sort of thing, and in spite of the fact that there had been dishonesty there, of rebuilding that that, you know, that you can ask something of someone and they'll honor that.
Yep. Yeah. Maybe just for interest's sake. So I'm just thinking about people involved, right? So because not everybody is into open relationships and can think about like hierarchy, polyamory, or, you know, all the different structures. So I have Markus and Rochelle here, and they're identifying as a romantic sexual couple. Rochelle has a nesting partner, and Rochelle's nesting partner has a romantic sexual partner.
Yeah.
And that's everybody.
Yeah.
That's everybody in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, well, that's everybody, although my nesting partner's other partner identifies as solo poly.
Okay.
Which means that although she is very committed to David and she also has other partners, and she has chosen to never live with another partner or share finances or become entwined in that way. So it's an anarchic relationship philosophy that she comes from.
Well, and that's a really good point, because now we're bringing another type of dynamic into the mix, but I think that's a really good one to identify as one that kind of works within your dynamic, because not that it's less of a complication, but it kind of is. Would it be?
It's another dimension that I think actually adds something to our polycule, which is the other word that we use for all the people involved in this thing, which involves, I suppose, our children and our pets. Like, we think of ourselves as a polycule, like a molecule, but, poly. And it's that my nesting partner's other partner has a very open dynamic, and that I find that fascinating. And I also find it fascinating that David doesn't feel any jealousy or insecurity around that. And she has been able to make him feel so trusting that, they can all go on holiday with her and her other partners. And it's really inspiring, actually, because Markus and I haven't found it quite so easy to share each other with new people when we've tried that at various times.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting thing too, isn't it? That the heart can feel differently about sharing one partner as opposed to another.
Mm.
Yeah.
That is actually a really good point.
Mm.
I wonder if it's, a bit of attachment style. I wonder, different dynamics of the individual. I'm wondering, that is fascinating.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that make up a relationship. A lot of people think if you're fucking, you're in a relationship. Sorry, I can't say that.
Oh, you could say fucking.
But do you know what I mean? That they equate sex with an intimate relationship, which is, absolutely not the case. The things that make up a relationship are much deeper than that, and on many different levels. And so you can find a challenge, like a new person coming into the midst can challenge, I guess I'm speaking generalities, but can challenge aspects of that. So if you have a really, entwined romantic emotional connection like Rochelle and I do, the possibility of that with someone else is sort of scary for the relationship. And depends on how you relate. I mean, there's all different kinds of, there are relationships that are undoubtedly relationships that don't involve sex at all. So like, say, if your parents, get really old and can't be bothered anymore and they've been married for 60 years, are they not in a relationship anymore?
There's plenty of sexless marriages out there. Let me tell you, that's why I've got a job.
Yeah.
No offense to anybody out there who has a sexless marriage, by the way.
No, but there are people that choose not to within a relationship, and they're still very much connected. It's
correct. Sex does not equal the relationship.
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder about jealousy, right? Because we're talking about sex and new partners and other partners, and how has that? How have you guys navigated that throughout your relationship?
A lot. We've navigated it a lot. It's been such a journey, and I think jealousy can be such a teacher, such a spiritual teacher, and such a gift, really, even though it's one of the most difficult, ugly things to feel at times. I think it's a path to growth. So we've had to navigate it a lot, but we will, I think anyone who's having to navigate jealousy, just know that you will come out of it stronger if you can really work with it rather than denying it or suppressing it or pretending it doesn't exist.
So it sounds like one way you've been able to kind of get through it is just sitting through it and actually acknowledging that it's there and talking about it.
Lots of talk. I mean, poly involves a lot of talk, especially at the start. Some people there's this cliche that everyone thinks poly people are having so much sex all the time, but they're not, because they're just talking about their emotions, processing.
Yeah.
You're not selling the idea.
I think there's another thing that in poly circles and that sort of stuff is the idea of taking responsibility for one's own emotions as well. Because there's a common thread of, you made me jealous, whereas in poly circles, it's like, I am jealous, but it's, I think there's a certain amount of taking responsibility for that emotion being something that's come from within you, and you have the power to work with that and to, you have the power to overcome that rather than it being out of your power by the fact that someone else has made you jealous.
Gotcha. Correct. Yeah.
So you don't have to go and kill your girlfriend or wife because she looked at another man. You could just take some responsibility for the fact that, yes, she's attracted to another man, but she didn't do anything. So you being jealous is maybe just something to work with and maybe enjoy.
And conversely, there's also the thing too of there can be a thing of like saying you're not supposed to be jealous. You're poly. You shouldn't be jealous at all.
Exactly.
And it does form part of, human emotion is part of that spectrum. And it's just a matter of being able to sit with it and go meta on your emotions and step back and kind of think about, okay, so look at this in context. And often jealousy really centers around fear, so it's looking at those fears and addressing them.
And that's a really good point that, I think people going to open their relationship or transitioning from open to polyamory or whatever degree think that jealousy is not, they don't account for it. They think it's not going to exist. Or if I'm in a polyamorous relationship now, I won't be jealous. And I think just that normalizing and accepting that you're a human and there's no way to just erase jealousy.
Yeah,
I think is pretty important for people out there to hear.
Yeah.
Now back to the, kind of keep bringing it to the eroticism here, but
go on then.
does jealousy kind of help spark more oomph into you guys?
It can do.
Yeah, definitely. I think like one of the first games that we played together around this stuff was gun to your head. So we're sitting in a bar and we're like, if you had a gun to your head, who would you want to sleep with in this bar tonight? And then...
If you had to, basically.
You had to.
You had to, okay.
And then we guess who the other person had picked. And so it's kind of like a way of theoretically bringing the other into the dynamic. And you imagine your partner being with someone else, desiring someone else, and it's a safe space to maybe talk about that. And it's probably something I'd really advise anyone to play with. I mean, even now we still do it. And it's like you start seeing your partner as a separate other human being with desires and emotions that aren't so entwined with yours. Because sometimes when you've been with someone for so long, you feel like you're related.
Yeah.
And it's almost incestuous to desire them. Whereas this creates that little bit of distance. It's like, we're separate sexual beings.
There you go. So a little bit of distance kind of creates back to that eroticism. Yeah. It makes you kind of want it. I play that game, but on my own in a bar.
Without the gun to your head.
Without the gun to my head. It's not as fun.
But there's also there's also that sort of aspect of, if you've had some kind of exploration, there's that thing of reclamation sex as well. In terms of what you're talking about jealousy spicing things up. It does, even like we've had some misadventures in that sort of thing, the things that haven't worked out and that have been difficult, but it's still actually in some ways brought us closer together because it's spiced up. There's a sense of reclaiming that person, which is kind of really hot.
Well, and it brings it back to you two.
Yeah.
And I guess, when I'm working with monogamous folk, I teach my clients that everything that they learn, and even if they don't like something, it's still a win because they've learned something, they've tried something new, and it's fine. It's great that they don't like something. So then from a poly perspective, you're saying, well, maybe you brought somebody else in, or you tried something else, or experimented in some fashion that involved other humans, and it didn't work. And that's brought you two together. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I guess because sometimes you can have experiences that push you apart, and it's a matter of you finding a path back to each other as well. It's not like any.
Correct.
I think it's like if you have any experience that it's going to necessarily bring you together, but it's how you react to it reaffirms your commitment to each other by going, okay, this didn't go as planned. This has raised some difficult emotions or whatever. How can we work with? I mean, usually, as you said, you would discover something about yourself through that process.
Yeah.
But you can take that and build on that and go, okay, well, we've discovered this about us. That doesn't work. So let's not do that. Let's make a thing in future not to go that direction.
Yeah, like just to give an example, the first time we found ourselves in a threesome, it was all fun and games until afterwards when we started processing what had happened, and Marcus started feeling like maybe I had been engineering that threesome kind of behind his back or maybe without his full knowledge. And so then it all became about, was this really a consensual threesome that just happened because we were all a bit messy and drunk, or was it something that you were engineering? And so we had to have all these discussions about, so when we want something else to happen with other people, how exactly should that look? What processes how much disclosure do we need? What does honesty mean? What does flirting mean? If I say I've been flirting with someone else, does that mean I've been like full on saying, I want to, have a thing with you, or is it just your hair looks nice today? Like what does flirting even mean? So we had to get really explicit, and we learned so much about each other through that, even though it was like 3 months of hardly sleeping and a lot of talking, I think, from memory.
Wow. I think that's another takeaway for people is that, and I'm a very big advocate of that, is actually defining what things mean to you. Because as you said, what is flirting to you might not be flirting to you, Marcus.
Exactly.
And that's just flirting. What does infidelity look like? What does honesty look like? The amount of people who come into my office who do not have these conversations, and it's assumed, I would say would almost be 9 out of 10 people have an assumption based on these definitions and that we're on the same page. We're in a relationship, therefore we don't need to have these conversations. And I think, well, even though they're kind of a little bit unsexy, they still heighten the sexiness in the long run to know exactly definitive how your partner feels and defines things.
Yeah, because, we grew up or came of age in the 80s when no one talked about consent at all. Yeah, so we grew up in the 80s or came of age in the 80s where no one talked about consent at all. And it would have been so uncool to even talk about, is this okay with you? When you put your hand on someone's knee or whatever. And so there's that kind of resistance that I guess we had at the start of having to have these conversations which seem unsexy, and really changing your mindset around what a fun, sexy conversation can look like, and that it's okay to talk about things on a really granular level.
I don't know that does make it unsexy necessarily.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, intimacy is sexy, so getting to know someone on a deeper level and what they want and all that sort of stuff is, I think, really sexy because it brings you closer to them. But you can have you can be at a party and sort of say, I would really like to kiss you. How would you feel about that? And that can happen, and that can be really sexy. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to just kind of I don't know, I guess kind of in the 80s, people just move in and see if it happened. Do you know what I mean? Whereas there's nothing sexier than that person wants to kiss you back and they've said yes. And it's like, you're both in this. They're not people pleasing and going, oh God, get off me or anything like that. It's like, it's a connection. It's great.
That's a paradigm shift is all I'm saying. It is sexy now. When you say it like that, I want to kiss you right now.
And I'm just watching. So I guess kind of a silly question, but, back to the kind of the kitchen table style and everybody's comfortable. Do you celebrate everyone's birthday together? Do you celebrate holidays? Do you have to navigate who's doing New Year's with who?
Yeah, well, it's family. We do all that stuff together, Christmases and birthdays, and it's the thing about poly is it kind of expands your bunch of people, your crew,
tribe,
your tribe, yeah.
And so we all sort of mutually celebrate and sort of support each other. Yeah.
I mean, we navigate that stuff really easily now. with a great deal of give and take and generosity, and it's not like tit for tat. But in the early days, it was a lot more there was a lot more control around that stuff. And, I mean, there was a time in our relationship when Markus started seeing someone else for a while, and she wanted a full-on romantic partnership with him. And she started talking about, what do we do at Christmas, really early in the piece. And I totally panicked because I was not ready to share my Christmas with her or anyone, actually. And, it was like a real experience of humility for me to know what my partner had gone through for me to be able to have Christmas with Markus. But it was also like, I just don't think that's really going to be workable for me. And I think people should definitely not rush themselves into having kitchen table poly if it doesn't feel right for everyone concerned, because it's such a chemistry thing.
Well, that's what it's sounding like. I guess, one thing that I speak about in clinic a lot is just how like shifting of the goalposts, right? So when you open up a relationship to whatever degree you're opening, it doesn't have to be within the confines of what you kind of picture. And once you start experiencing things, you're going to either close it, change the goalposts. 10 years on, here you guys are sitting here.
Yeah.
Are there any goalposts changing? Are you pretty, happy within your agreements? Do these conversations even come up a decade later?
That's a good question.
I think a lot of things are settled for us now, but if I know anything, it's that things can just change. I mean, there's a sense you have to be open to some amazing person might arrive on the horizon, and Markus might be like, I'd really like to get to know this person better, and they're amazing. And I think I'd be open to that in a way that I wasn't before. We're also a lot more relaxed now because we know we've been through so much together that it's like we know we'll get through whatever comes to us.
Yeah. It's like there's a familiarity. When something comes up, there's like we've been here before. I've survived this before. We know that we will get through this, which kind of helps have a bit more of a relaxed sense around any sort of new connections and that sort of stuff. But we also really know how each other works, and can be able to predict more things that are going to be difficult and things that are not.
Yeah, yep.
And we've also come to this discovery that what we want is a relationship where we prioritize our relationship above new connections, and we will both do that whenever, it comes to the crunch. Our relationship is more important than the individual desires each of us
that's
have,
a good point.
either of us have. So that creates a great sense of safety.
Yeah. So it sounds like you both lean very heavily back into trust and commitment, right? So I guess irrespective of if we are looking at monogamy or non-monogamy, the fact that you have such a high level of trust and commitment to each other, the rest is kind of not irrelevant, but it's doable.
I think there's also even more trust. Like, I think if we were monogamous, I wouldn't know you so intimately, Like, I think because we've explored almost kind of like relationship astronauts, we've kind of gone.
I like that.
We've gone out to outer space and seen these things, and it sort of enables you to sort of know more. You have more idea of the emotional landscape that your relationship inhabits, I guess. And there's a greater intimacy in that because you've seen things in that person you wouldn't otherwise have seen.
That's a really good point. And I think that's probably something for monogamous folk out there to really pay attention to, is how can you really deep dive into your relationship if you would like to be monogamous. And kind of like what I was saying earlier, of people who don't discuss definitions of what trust or flirting is. I mean, if you can't do that, how can you get to this beautiful level of, pure intimacy between you and just another? So it's a good moment of reflection for everyone out there. So, Rochelle, I know you're a writer, and this is quite the story. This is a story that I think really should be a movie, but it's not there yet. But can you? You've finished a book, haven't you?
Yes, I've just written a novel. It's called Double Happiness, and it's a story about one woman and two men and what if she didn't have to choose. So it could have been inspired by my life, but it's fiction. It's written from three perspectives. And, I wanted to explore how a family can evolve over time when, this stuff comes into play.
Wow. That's probably a huge conversation for us to chat about, is just how a family can evolve, not just your relationship and what you guys have faced, romantically and sexually, but from a family perspective, that's huge. So when is the novel out? When can we look out for that?
It's coming. It's going to be out on the 1st of October. You can pre-order it now. It's very exciting.
How long has that been in the works?
I think I started writing it about 7 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also Double Happiness is a bar in Melbourne, and it's happens to be a very significant place for us because that's where David and Markus met for the first time.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it just sounded. It's also the Chinese symbol for happy marriage. Double happiness. It's the Chinese character.
Did you guys pick that on purpose?
David was asking a friend of his where he should meet me, and the friend said, it's got to be Double Happiness. And so,
And then he's like, that's what your book has to be called, Double Happiness.
Oh, my gosh. Wow. That's really exciting. All right. October's not far away.
No.
So that's all right.
Yeah, I'd love people to pick it up and have a read. And it's definitely not an advertisement for polyamory or non-monogamy. It goes into the difficulties, but also the joys. And I just want to put it on the record here that I think monogamy can be a really beautiful thing where people can grow to. And it's just that how wonderful that we live in a time when there are other options for people. There's a menu of things, and it's a discussion we can have. Do I want to be monogamous?
Absolutely. So we all have the agency to figure out what we want and where our happiness lies.
Yeah.
That's so huge. Hopefully then, again, another moment of reflection for everyone listening is where does your happiness lie, and do you need to be monogamous or non-monogamous, and is there a difference? And have you thought about any different relationship structures or sexual identities or orientations that maybe don't sit well with you at the moment that could be worth exploring? Because you're right, we don't live in a world where we have to be a particular way. I think that's quite huge. Thanks, guys, for coming.
Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, thanks.